What if the seat you tried to steal belonged to the one person on the plane you should never, ever cross? We've all seen frustrating travel stories, but this isn't just about a stolen seat. It's a story about a quiet, elderly woman, a first-class bully, and a single metallic card that held the power to unravel a life built on arrogance. Stay with me as we uncover how a single act of blatant racism on Aura Airlines Flight 88 from New York to London didn't just end in an argument. It ended in a total, life-shattering karmic explosion. All because one woman forgot that true power doesn't always scream. You are about to hear the story of Agnes Dubois and the lifetime Founder's Pass. The air in JFK's International Terminal 4 was thick with the usual cocktail of human emotion, the frantic energy of the late, the weary patience of the seasoned traveler, and the buzzing excitement of those embarking on an adventure. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, garbled announcements, and a dozen different languages, clashing in a controlled chaos. At Gate 17, the destination was London Heathrow, a red-eye flight on the sleek, modern Aura Airlines Airbus A350. The gate area was a microcosm of society itself, a temporary holding pen for lives about to intersect at 35,000 feet. Among the waiting passengers was Mrs. Agnes Dubois. At 82, she moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace that seemed to create a small pocket of calm around her. She was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue travel suit, her silver hair styled in a neat coif. Her dark, intelligent eyes, framed by fine lines that spoke of a life rich with both laughter and trials, scanned the pages of a well-worn book of poetry. She held herself with a quiet dignity that was unassuming yet profound. Anyone giving her more than a passing glance might have just seen a sweet old grandmother, perhaps off to visit her grandchildren. They would have been right about the grandchildren, but they would have missed the steel in her spine forged over decades of breaking barriers most couldn't even see. A short distance away, a much different energy radiated from another couple destined for the same flight. Caroline and Mark Finch were the picture of modern, aggressive affluence. Caroline, a sharp-featured woman in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob and an outfit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was speaking into her phone with a volume that suggested she owned the very airwaves. "No, Richard, you tell them the offer is final. It's not a negotiation, it's a declaration." She snapped her voice, cutting through the general hum of the terminal. Her husband, Mark, stood beside her, looking harried and occasionally nodding in sycophantic agreement. He was a man who had long ago ceded the driver's seat of their shared life to his wife's relentless ambition. They were flying, first class, a fact Caroline had made known to the gate agent, the man at the coffee kiosk, and now seemingly the entire eastern seaboard. They clutched their boarding passes for seats 1B and 1C like trophies. Their sense of entitlement was a palpable force, an invisible wall that kept others at a distance. They cut the line at the coffee stand, complained about the lack of dedicated seating for platinum members right at the gate, and generally treated the airport staff like personal servants. Agnes Dubois, from behind the cover of her book, observed them with a practiced neutrality. She had seen 1,000 Carolines in her lifetime. They came in different packages from different backgrounds, but their core was always the same, a deep-seated insecurity, papered over with arrogance, a belief that their worth was measured in status, and their right to comfort superseded everyone else's. She'd learned long ago that engaging with such people was a fool's errand. The best course of action was to simply let them be, like a foul wind that would eventually pass. The boarding announcement finally crackled to life. First, the pre-boarding for families with young children and those needing extra assistance. A young mother struggling with a stroller and a crying toddler was met with an audible theatrical sigh from Caroline. "Some people are just so unprepared," she muttered to Mark, loud enough for the mother to hear her cheeks flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. Agnes closed her book, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. She waited patiently. The next call was for first class. Caroline and Mark were instantly at the front, pushing their boarding passes forward with an air of triumphant arrival. Agnes waited until the line had thinned. Her boarding pass was for seat 1A, a window seat. She had specifically chosen it months in advance. It was her favorite seat on this particular aircraft, a small creature comfort she allowed herself. As she approached the gate, she handed her pass to the smiling agent. "Good evening, Mrs. Dubois," the agent said, her eyes widening slightly as she read the name. "It is an honor to have you with us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful flight." "Thank you, dear. I'm sure I will," Agnes replied with a warm, genuine smile that made the agent feel seen and appreciated. She walked down the jet bridge, the gentle slope leading her toward the aircraft. The scent of recycled air and disinfectant greeted her, a familiar smell that had accompanied her on countless journeys across the globe. She stepped into the brightly lit cabin, gave a polite nod to the flight attendants at the door, and turned left into the exclusive first-class cabin. The cabin was a sanctuary of soft lighting, muted greys, and spacious pods. She saw Mark Finch in 1C already struggling with the overhead bin, and then she saw his wife Caroline settling comfortably, not into seat 1B, but into 1A. Her seat. Agnes paused, her hand resting on the top of the adjacent seat. She assumed it was a simple mistake. It happened all the time. With a gentle clearing of her throat, she prepared to politely correct the error entirely, unaware that she was not walking toward a simple misunderstanding, but toward a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the confines of the aluminum tube she now stood in. The storm that had been gathering at the gate was about to break. For a moment, Agnes simply stood there, allowing the possibility of a simple mistake to be the prevailing explanation. The first-class cabin was only half full at this point, with other passengers still finding their way, and the flight attendants busy with welcoming greetings and requests for pre-departure beverages. She approached seat 1A with that same unhurried grace. Caroline Finch was busy, her back mostly to the aisle, as she arranged her large, expensive-looking handbag on the floor, plugging her phone into the USB port with a sense of practiced ownership. "Excuse me." Agnes began, her voice soft but clear, carrying the natural authority of a retired educator. "I believe you might be in my seat." Caroline didn't even turn around fully. She craned her neck, her eyes sweeping over Agnes, from her sensible shoes to her silver hair, in a dismissive, evaluative glance that lasted no more than 2 seconds. "I don't think so," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. She then turned back to her phone, a clear signal that the conversation was in her mind over. Agnes held her ground. She was not a woman easily flustered. "I understand mistakes happen," she continued, her voice maintaining its polite but firm tone. "My boarding pass is for 1A. Perhaps you could check yours." This time, Caroline did turn her face a mask of annoyed impatience. "Look," she said, her voice rising slightly, attracting the attention of her husband, Mark, in the adjacent seat. "I am in 1A. I like the window. My husband is in 1B. She lied, gesturing vaguely to the empty seat between her and Mark. "And we are flying together. The airline must have made an error with your ticket." Mark, ever the echo, chimed in. "That's right, the system probably has a glitch. You should go talk to one of the flight attendants. I'm sure there's a perfectly good seat for you. Somewhere else." His eyes darted towards the back of the plane, the implication clear. Agnes held up her boarding pass. The large, bold print was unmistakable: Dubois A, Seat 1A. "There is no mistake on my part," she stated simply. "This is my assigned seat." Caroline let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. "And I'm telling you, it's not. This is a first-class cabin. Are you even in the right section economy boards from the other aisle?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and sharp. It was a classic dog whistle, a thinly veiled insinuation that a black woman, particularly an elderly one, couldn't possibly belong in such an exclusive space unless it was by mistake. The politeness in Agnes's eyes finally began to recede, replaced by a weary resolve. "I am quite aware of where I am, thank you," Agnes said, her voice now edged with a cold precision. "And I am in my correct, paid-for and assigned seat. I will ask you one more time politely. Please move." The standoff had now drawn the attention of a young flight attendant named Chloe, who had been serving champagne a few rows back. She hurried over, her face etched with a professional, placating smile. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her eyes moving between the indignant Caroline and the implacable Agnes. "Yes," Caroline snapped, seizing the opportunity to have an authority figure validate her position. "This woman is insisting that my seat is hers. She's harassing me. She probably wandered up from the back of the plane. You need to escort her to her actual seat." Chloe looked at Agnes, who simply presented her boarding pass. Chloe took it and examined it. Her smile tightened. "Ma'am," she said, turning to Caroline. "It appears there has been a mistake. Seat 1A is indeed assigned to Mrs. Dubois. Your boarding pass is for 1B. "That's ridiculous." Caroline spat, her face flushing a blotchy red. "I booked a window seat. I am a Platinum Elite member. I have priority. This is unacceptable. You need to fix this." "I understand your frustration, ma'am," Chloe said, her training kicking in. "But 1A is Mrs. Dubois' seat. I need to ask you to please move to your assigned seat at 1B. "No," Caroline said, crossing her arms like a petulant child. "I am not moving. I got here first. It's my seat now. Find her another one. I'm sure there are other window seats on this plane." People like her shouldn't be making such a fuss. The phrase "people like her" was the final straw. It was no longer a subtext. It was the headline. The air grew thick with tension. Other passengers were now openly staring, their conversations tapering off. Mark Finch looked deeply uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and whispering, "Caroline, just move to the other seat." "Be quiet, Mark," she hissed back, unwilling to concede defeat. Chloe, the young flight attendant, was now in over her head. This wasn't a simple seat dispute anymore. It had morphed into an ugly display of prejudice and defiance. "Ma'am, if you refuse to comply with a crew member's instructions, I will have to get my purser," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Then get him," Caroline challenged, leaning back into seat 1A, with an air of finality, as if staking a physical claim. "Get the pilot for all I care. I am not being displaced for her." Agnes Dubois stood silent, her boarding pass still in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held a profound disappointment. She had offered this woman a chance to rectify her mistake with dignity. That chance had been refused, then spat upon. She had hoped for a simple, quiet journey. That hope was now gone. Chloe gave Agnes an apologetic look and quickly walked toward the galley to retrieve her superior. Agnes remained standing, a pillar of quiet strength in the aisle. She did not argue further. She did not raise her voice. She simply waited. She knew with a certainty born of long and hard-won experience, that this was a battle she would not lose. Caroline Finch, in her blind arrogance, had no idea who she was dealing with. She saw an old woman. She failed to see the unmovable object. The few minutes it took for the purser to arrive felt like an eternity. The first-class cabin was suspended in a state of awkward silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit. Caroline Finch sat rigidly in seat 1A, a smug, triumphant look on her face, as if she had won a great victory. She scrolled through her phone pointedly, ignoring the elderly woman she had displaced. Mark looked anywhere but at his wife or Agnes, his face a portrait of spineless misery. Agnes, meanwhile, remained standing, her posture relaxed but resolute. She had placed her small carry-on bag on the floor and was simply waiting. She didn't look angry or distressed. If anything, she looked resigned, as if this were a tiresome but familiar ritual. Her patience was unnerving. It was the patience of someone who holds all the cards and is merely waiting for the right moment to play them. Soon, a tall man with silver-flecked temples and a calm, authoritative demeanor emerged from the galley. This was David Reed, the flight's purser. He had the weary but sharp eyes of a man who had seen everything the world of air travel could throw at him, from medical emergencies to celebrity meltdowns. Chloe followed a step behind him, looking anxious. "Good evening," David said, his voice a smooth baritone that commanded attention. "Chloe tells me we have a seating issue." Caroline immediately launched into her performance. "It's more than an issue," she began, her voice laden with grievance. "Your attendant has been incredibly unhelpful. I am a Platinum Elite member, and this woman," she gestured dismissively at Agnes, "is trying to claim my seat. She came up from the economy, I think. I have been harassed, and frankly, I am appalled at the service." David listened impassively, his eyes taking in the entire scene, Caroline's aggressive posture, Mark's cowering form, and Agnes's quiet dignity. He turned to Agnes. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Agnes handed it to him. He studied it for a moment, then looked at the seat number 1A, and then back at Caroline. "And ma'am," he said to Caroline, "may I see yours?" Caroline huffed and produced her pass from her designer handbag. David took it. "This says 1B, ma'am, as in Bravo." "It's a mistake, the system is wrong," Caroline insisted. "My travel agent booked a window. Check my status. Finch, Caroline, Platinum Elite. We spend over $100,000 a year with this airline." David's face remained a professional mask, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. "Ma'am, your status does not change the seat assignments. The fact is, this is Mrs. Dubois's seat. I need you to gather your belongings and move to 1B so we can complete our pre-flight preparations and depart on time." This was the final official directive. It was no longer a suggestion from a junior flight attendant. It was an order from the man in charge of the cabin. But Caroline's ego, now fully engaged in a public power struggle, would not allow her to back down. "No," she said, her voice low and venomous. "I will not. What are you going to do?" "Drag me off the plane. I'll sue this airline for everything it's worth. I want to know who this woman is that she gets to displace a loyal, high-paying customer. Who the hell are you?" she directed at Agnes, her voice dripping with scorn. The question hung in the air. "Who are you?" Agnes Dubois finally met Caroline's hateful gaze. The weariness in her own eyes was gone, replaced by something else, a deep and unshakable authority that seemed to emanate from her very core. She did not answer the question directly. Instead, she reached into her handbag, the one Caroline had likely dismissed as a grandmotherly purse, and retrieved a simple, elegant leather wallet. She didn't hurry. Every motion was deliberate. She unsnapped the wallet, and from a special silk-lined pocket, she pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a frequent flyer card. It was a solid piece of brushed titanium, thin, but heavy with a dark blue, almost black finish. The Aura Airlines logo, a stylized A that resembled a bird in flight, was laser-etched in silver on the top. Below it there were no numbers, no expiration dates. There were only 3 lines of engraved text. The first line was a name, Agnes M. Dubois. The second line contained 2 words, Lifetime Founder. And the third, a single powerful phrase, Pass number 002. She held the card not with a flourish, but with a quiet finality, and presented it to David. David Reed froze. His professional composure shattered, replaced by a look of utter astonishment which quickly morphed into one of profound, almost reverential respect. He took a half-step back as if the card itself emitted an aura. Every flight purser, every pilot, every senior executive at Aura Airlines knew of these cards. They were legends, relics from the company's inception. Only 5 were ever made. Number 001 belonged to the late founder and CEO, Jonathan Steele. Numbers 003, 004, and 005 belonged to the primary venture capitalists who had risked everything on a fledgling airline startup 30 years ago. And number 002 belonged to Dr. Agnes M. Dubois, the brilliant aeronautical engineer and software designer who had co-founded the company with Steele. She was the genius who had developed their proprietary logistical software and revolutionary fuel efficiency systems, the very technological backbone that had allowed Aura to dominate the transatlantic market. She hadn't been on the board for over a decade, having retired to a quiet life, but her legacy was written into every flight plan, every maintenance schedule, every single thing that made the airline run. Ms. Dubois. David breathed, his voice barely a whisper. He straightened his tie, his posture shifting from that of an authority figure to that of a subordinate. My sincerest apologies. I had no idea. Caroline Finch watched this exchange, her smug expression melting away into baffled confusion. What is that? Some kind of super platinum card? She sneered, trying to regain control. What's a founder's pass? David turned to her, and the professional warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by an icy fury. Ma'am, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The founder's pass gives Ms. Dubois seniority over any passenger, any crew member, and in certain situations even the captain of this aircraft. This is not her plane. In a very real sense, it is her airline. And you are in her seat. The truth of the situation finally slammed into Caroline. The color drained from her face. She looked at Agnes, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not an old, misplaced woman, but a figure of immense, silent power. The woman whose seat she had stolen, the woman she had insulted, belittled, and racially profiled, was effectively the queen of the very kingdom in which Caroline had been so proudly flaunting her minor nobility. The twist was complete. The game was over, and the consequences were about to begin. The revelation of the founder's pass acted like a switch, instantly changing the entire dynamic of the first-class cabin. The whispers among the other passengers grew louder, a mixture of awe and delicious schadenfreude. One passenger, a young tech entrepreneur named Alex Hayes in seat 3K, had been discreetly filming the entire interaction on his phone from the moment Caroline had raised her voice. He zoomed in, on the stunned, horrified expression on her face, knowing he was capturing pure gold. David Reed, the purser, straightened up to his full height. His deference to Agnes was matched only by the newfound steel in his tone toward Caroline. "Ma'am," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Gather your things. Now." Caroline was paralyzed. Her mind, which was usually a whirlwind of aggressive strategies and cutting remarks, was completely blank. The world had just turned upside down. The social hierarchy she relied on, where her money and her status placed her at the top, had been obliterated by a single piece of titanium. She looked to her husband, Mark, for support, but he was already gathering his own belongings, his face pale and beaded with sweat. He looked utterly terrified, like a man who had just realized he'd been cheering for someone insulting the Queen in Buckingham Palace. "But my ticket," Caroline stammered the words hollow. "Your ticket is for Wunby," David stated flatteredly. "And a moment ago I would have been happy to see you seated there. However, circumstances have changed." Agnes, who had been watching this all unfold, finally spoke. Her voice was not triumphant or vengeful, but filled with a deep, resonant sadness. "David," she said, addressing the purser, "it's all right. I don't wish to cause any more of a scene. If she would just move to her assigned seat, we can all put this behind us." It was a moment of grace, an off-ramp offered to a woman who deserved none. Agnes was not interested in punishment. She was interested in peace. She just wanted to sit down, read her book, and fly to London to see her grandson graduate. But for Caroline Finch, it was the worst possible thing Agnes could have said. To be offered pity, to be granted mercy by the woman she had just tried to humiliate, was an indignity her colossal ego could not withstand. It was salt in a gaping wound. "Don't you patronize me?" Caroline shrieked, her voice cracking. She stood up, knocking her bag to the floor. "You think you're so special with your little card? This is an outrage. I am a paying customer. I have rights." That was her final fatal mistake. The offer of grace had been rejected. David Reed's face hardened into a mask of cold professionalism. "You are correct, ma'am. You were a paying customer," he said, the past tense landing like a hammer blow. "However, your behavior has violated several articles of the carriage contract. You have repeatedly refused to comply with crew instructions, and you have verbally harassed another passenger. Your tirade is delaying this flight's departure. This is a security issue." He keyed the small microphone on his collar. "This is Purser Reed. I need a gate supervisor and airport security to attend the aircraft at Gate 17 immediately. We have a passenger removal situation." The words security and passenger removal echoed through the silent cabin. This was the ultimate humiliation for an air traveler. Caroline stared at him, her mouth agape, looking like a fish out of water. "You can't do this," she whispered, the fight finally draining out of her. "I can and I am," David said. He then turned to Agnes. "Ms. Dubois, please accept my deepest apologies on behalf of the entire airline for what you have just endured. Please take your seat. May I get you something to drink? A glass of Dom Perignon. It's the 08 vintage. Some warm water with lemon would be lovely." "Thank you, David." Agnes replied, her composure absolute. She stepped past the petrified Caroline, placed her carry-on in the overhead bin, and settled into seat 1A, with a quiet sigh as if she were simply coming home. Within 2 minutes, 2 Port Authority police officers and the Aura Airlines gate supervisor were at the door of the aircraft. They walked down the aisle with grim, no-nonsense expressions. "Mir and Mrs. Finch," the supervisor asked, though it was obvious who they were. "We're going to have to ask you to come with us." Mark Finch was already on his feet, fumbling with their bags, eager to escape. He wouldn't even look at his wife, but Caroline remained frozen, staring at Agnes. She was looking at the woman who, without raising her voice, had just dismantled her entire world in under 5 minutes. "Please, ma'am," one of the officers said, his hand gesturing toward the aisle. "Let's go. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." As they were escorted past the other passengers, a palpable sense of justice settled over the cabin. Alex Hayes's phone captured it all. Caroline's face a mask of shame and fury. Mark's hurried head-down retreat. And Agnes Dubois, sitting calmly by the window, opening her book of poetry, as if nothing had happened at all. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal, a public shaming of the highest order. But as Caroline and Mark were led off the jet bridge and back into the terminal, they had no idea that this was only the beginning of their fall. The real consequences were still to come. Back in the terminal, the humiliation for Caroline and Mark Finch intensified. They weren't taken to a quiet office for a polite conversation. They were led to the main customer service desk, right beside the gate, in full view of the other passengers still waiting for different flights. The gate supervisor, a stern woman named Maria, held their passports and boarding passes. "So I can be clear about what's happening." Maria began, her voice professional, but devoid of any warmth. "Your tickets for this flight, Aura 88, have been cancelled due to your non-compliance with crew member instructions and disruptive behavior." "This is insane," Caroline muttered, her face pale. "We need to get to London. We have meetings." "That will no longer be possible on Aura Airlines," Maria continued, ignoring her plea. "Due to the nature of the incident, particularly the verbal harassment reported by the cabin crew, you, Mrs. Finch, are being placed on our permanent no-fly list. This is effective immediately and applies to all our partner airlines as well." Caroline's jaw dropped. "Permanent? You can't be serious." "We are," Maria said, her gaze unblinking. "Mr. Finch," she said, turning to Mark. "Due to your complicity in the situation, you will be receiving a 5-year ban. A formal notification will be sent to your registered email addresses within the hour." A 5-year ban, a permanent ban. In the world of international business, they inhabited this was a death sentence. Aura and its partners represented a significant portion of the premium transatlantic routes. "But our luggage," Mark stammered, his mind finally catching up to the disastrous reality. "It's on the plane. It is being offloaded as we speak," Maria said coolly. "You can wait for it at the main baggage claim in approximately 60 to 90 minutes. Furthermore, because your tickets were cancelled due to a breach of contract on your part, they are non-refundable. Your return tickets from London have also been voided." Every word was a nail in the coffin of their trip, their status and their pride. They were stranded, banned, and out thousands of dollars. Caroline, who had built her entire identity on being a person who gave orders and was listened to, was rendered utterly powerless. Meanwhile, on board Flight 88, the atmosphere had transformed. As soon as the Finches were gone, a spontaneous, quiet ripple of applause broke out in the first-class cabin. Agnes simply gave a small, gracious nod. The pilot, Captain Miller, a veteran with 30 years in the cockpit, emerged from the flight deck. He walked directly to seat 1A. "Ms. Dubois," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "I'm Captain John Miller. I just heard what happened. On behalf of the entire crew, I want to offer my most sincere and profound apology. There is no excuse for what you experienced on my aircraft. It is an honor to have you with us." "Thank you, Captain," Agnes said warmly, shaking his hand. "It was an unfortunate situation, but your crew particularly. David and young Chloe handled it with professionalism." Her praise for Chloe, who was standing nearby, brought tears to the young flight attendant's eyes. Later during the flight, Agnes would call her over. She didn't lecture or rehash the incident. Instead, she asked Chloe about her ambitions about her family. She shared a story from her early days as an engineer, being the only woman and the only person of color in a room of 100 men. Dignity. Agnes told her, her voice a gentle murmur over the drone of the engines, is the one thing no one can take from you. You can only give it away. Today, that woman gave hers away for the price of a window seat. Never sell yours so cheaply. Chloe would remember that conversation for the rest of her life. The ripple effect continued. Alex Hayes, the tech entrepreneur, sat in his seat, his mind racing. He had over 1 million followers on a popular tech-focused social media platform. He knew a powerful story when he saw one. He began editing the video clips, piecing together the narrative, the entitled woman's initial refusal. Her racist remarks, the flight attendant's plea, and the final glorious reveal of the founder's pass, followed by her humiliating removal. He typed out a caption. On my flight to London, and witnessed something wild. This woman in first class refused to give an elderly black lady her seat, making racist comments. Little did she know the woman she was harassing was Agnes Dubois, one of the co-founders of the airline. Karma is real. Aura Airlines. Flying. While black, #karma. He hesitated for a moment, then added the hashtag #Caroline. Finch, having overheard her name during the tirade. He hit post just as the flight attendants instructed everyone to switch their devices to airplane mode. The plane pushed back from the gate, leaving the Finches and their shattered pride behind on the tarmac. As Flight 88 soared over the Atlantic, the video Alex posted began its own journey, rocketing through the digital world at the speed of light. While Agnes slept peacefully in her fully reclined seat, a storm of righteous indignation was brewing on the ground. By the time they landed in London, the story would no longer be a private incident on a plane. It would be a global phenomenon. The cascade of karma had only just begun. For Caroline and Mark Finch, the public humiliation at the gate was merely the first wave of a tsunami that was about to crash down on their entire lives. For the 8 hours that Aura Flight 88 was in the air, the video posted by Alex Hayes went from a viral curiosity to a full-blown international news story. The internet, in its unpredictable and often ferocious way, had appointed itself judge, jury, and executioner. The hashtag Caroline Finch exploded. Finch. Amateur sleuths on social media, armed with the fragments of information from the video, quickly pieced together her identity. She was Caroline Finch, a senior partner at the high-powered New York corporate law firm of Sterling, Croft and Pierce. The firm's website proudly displayed her biography, touting her expertise in aggressive litigation and her commitment to uncompromising excellence. The irony was not lost on anyone. By the time Agnes Dubois was being personally escorted through Heathrow's VIP arrival service, the law firm's social media pages were being flooded with a deluge of negative comments and one-star reviews. "Is this the firm that employs the racist seat stealer?" one comment read. "I wouldn't trust Caroline Finch to litigate a parking ticket after seeing how she treats an elderly woman." Sterling, Croft and Pierce home of uncompromising entitlement. The firm's PR department woke up to a 5-alarm fire. Their phones rang off the hook with calls from journalists. By 9:00 a.m. London time, which was 4:00 a.m. in New York, the managing partners were on an emergency conference call. Their firm, built on a century of carefully cultivated reputation for ruthless but respectable professionalism, was being dragged through the mud by the actions of one of its most visible partners. Back in New York, Caroline and Mark Finch had retrieved their luggage in stony silence. The 90-minute wait at the baggage carousel had been excruciating, filled with the stares and whispers of people who had recognized them from the gate. Their phones had been buzzing incessantly. At first, Caroline thought it was just concerned colleagues wondering why they'd missed their flight. Then she saw the messages. Then she saw the video. She watched herself on the screen of her phone, her own voice distorted and shrill, spewing arrogance and prejudice. She saw her face contorted in a mask of ugly entitlement. And she saw the comments. Thousands of them. Hateful, vitriolic, and utterly damning. "It's everywhere," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "It's on every news site." For Caroline, this was a nightmare, far worse than being banned from an airline. Her reputation, the bedrock of her career and social standing, was being incinerated in real time. Her life was built on perception, the perception of being powerful, intelligent, and in control. The video showed her as none of those things. It showed her as a common bully, a racist, and worst of all, a fool who had picked a fight with a giant. Meanwhile, the story of Agnes Dubois was also emerging. Journalists intrigued by the founder's pass began digging. They uncovered the story of a brilliant mind, a pioneer in STEM. They found articles from decades past, celebrating her achievements, her PhD from MIT at age 24, her groundbreaking work at NASA, and her eventual partnership with Jonathan Steele to create Aura Airlines. She was not just a co-founder. She was a national treasure who had largely withdrawn from the public eye. The video had inadvertently thrust her back into the spotlight, casting her as a symbol of grace and resilience in the face of bigotry. Aura Airlines, for its part, played the situation masterfully. Instead of a bland corporate statement, their CEO, a woman who had been mentored by Agnes years ago, released a personal message. The events that transpired on Flight 88 are deeply disturbing and do not reflect the values of Aura Airlines. We are proud of our crew for their handling of the situation. We are even prouder to count Dr. Agnes Dubois as a foundational member of our family. Her contributions to this company and to the field of aviation are immeasurable. We will be making a significant donation in her name to a charity of her choice that promotes STEM education for young women of color. To the individuals involved, let this be a lesson: respect and dignity are not optional extras. They are the price of admission. The statement was a PR masterstroke. It celebrated the hero, condemned the villain, and reinforced the company's brand, turning a potential disaster into a triumph. Agnes, blissfully unaware of the global firestorm, for most of the flight was met in London by her son and grandson. When they gently explained what was happening online, she simply shook her head with a sigh. "All that fuss," she said. "I do hope that woman finds some peace. A person so full of anger is their own worst punishment." But the world was not as forgiving as Agnes. Digital reckoning was in full swing, and it was about to have very real, very permanent consequences in the physical world. The karma that had started in the first-class cabin of an Airbus A350 was now a global force, and it was heading straight for Caroline Finch's corner office on the 50th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The Monday morning after the incident was grey and drizzling in New York City, a pathetic fallacy for the state of Caroline Finch's life. She had spent the entire weekend as a digital ghost. Her name a trending topic of scorn and ridicule. The video, now with over 50 million views across various platforms, had been picked up by major news networks. There were think pieces written about entitlement race and the forgotten pioneers of technology. Agnes Dubois had been respectfully approached for an interview, which she politely declined, stating she had said all she needed to say on the aircraft, and wished only to enjoy her family's company. Her silence was more powerful than any statement could have been. For Caroline, silence was no longer an option. At 8:00 a.m., she received a call from Arthur Sterling, the 80-year-old senior partner of the firm. His voice was like gravel and ice. "Caroline, be in my office at 10, and don't bring your briefcase. You won't be needing it." The line went dead. She knew what was coming. Dressed in her most severe and professional suit, she walked into the marble lobby of Sterling, Croft and Pierce, feeling like a dead woman walking. The looks from her colleagues, the whispers from the administrative staff, they all confirmed it. She was a pariah. In Arthur Sterling's vast wood-panelled office, the other senior partners were assembled. They looked at her not with anger, but with a cold, clinical disappointment. "Caroline," Sterling began, not bothering with pleasantries, "we have spent over a century building this firm's name. It has stood for integrity, power, and discretion. In the span of a single weekend, you have made it stand for bigotry and foolishness." "It was a misunderstanding." She tried her voice weak. "A misunderstanding." Another partner, a woman named Eleanor, interjected. "We saw the video, Caroline. We all did. So did our clients. We have already lost the Henderson account. They cited a values mismatch. That's a $5 million annual retainer gone. The board of the Children's Foundation where you sit has called an emergency meeting to vote on your removal." The news hit her like a physical blow. Every pillar of her meticulously constructed life was crumbling. "Effective immediately," Sterling continued. "We are invoking the morality clause in your partnership agreement. We are severing all ties with you. Your access to the building will be revoked at noon. Your personal effects will be boxed up and sent to your home. We are preparing a public statement announcing your resignation." "My resignation," she balked. "It is either your resignation, or we will publicly fire you for cause." Sterling set his eyes like flint. "One of these options allows you a shred of dignity. Choose wisely." Defeated, she nodded. There was nothing left to fight for. She had flown too close to the sun, and her wings, made of arrogance and entitlement, had melted completely. The karma for Mark was quieter, but just as devastating. His small investment firm relied on his reputation and his connections. By the end of the week, 3 of his largest investors had pulled their money, citing a lack of confidence in his judgment. His business partner, a man whose family he had known for 20 years, sat him down and initiated the process of buying him out. "I can't be in business with you, Mark," he'd said, his voice heavy with regret. "It's not about the money. It's about character. You just stood there." 6 months later, the Finch's world was unrecognizable. They had to sell their lavish Manhattan apartment to cover their losses. Caroline, unable to find work at any reputable firm in the country, was forced into early ignominious retirement. Mark's business folded. They moved to a small town in Florida, their social circle gone, their prestige evaporated. The name Caroline Finch was now a permanent digital stain, a cautionary tale whispered in corporate break rooms. And Agnes Dubois. After her trip to London, she returned to her quiet life. The charity Aura Airlines had donated to, in her name, the Dubois Initiative for Future Engineers, flourished, providing scholarships to hundreds of promising young students. She occasionally received letters from young women who had been inspired by her story, who saw in her a model of quiet strength and towering intellect. She never spoke of the incident again. She didn't have to. She sat in her garden, read her books of poetry, and sometimes when a plane flew overhead, she would look up and smile. She knew better than anyone that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. It was a fundamental law of physics. But as Caroline Finch had learned the hard way, it was also a fundamental law of life. The highest flights require the strongest character, and those who travel on wings of malice are destined for a hard landing. 5 years is a long time, long enough for a viral story to become a digital legend, a cautionary tale told in corporate ethics seminars. For Caroline and Mark Finch, it was long enough for the sharp sting of public humiliation to fade into the dull, chronic ache of obscurity. They lived a quiet, diminished life in a Florida suburb. Their world shrunk to the size of their manicured lawn and the local grocery store. The anger that had once fueled Caroline had mostly burned out, leaving behind the cold ash of regret. But for their son Julian, the past 5 years had been a crucible. He was 17 when the video destroyed his family's name, and he bore the shame like a physical weight. He watched his mother's arrogance shatter and his father's weakness become a permanent feature. He vowed to be neither. When he left for college at MIT, he legally took his mother's maiden name, becoming Julian Croft. He severed ties with his parents' past, determined to build a future on merit, humility, and hard work, not on a name that had become synonymous with disgrace. Julian excelled. He poured all his energy and intellect into his studies in aerospace engineering, finding a clean, beautiful logic in the complex mathematics of flight that was absent in the messy chaos of human behavior. In his final year, he applied for the most prestigious scholarship in his field, the Dubois Initiative for Future Engineers. It was a long shot, but his thesis on sustainable aviation fuel was groundbreaking. He never imagined he would win. When the acceptance letter came, his joy was quickly tempered by a cold knot of dread in his stomach. The award was to be presented at a special ceremony, and the keynote address would be given by the initiative's namesake, Dr. Agnes Dubois. For 5 years, that name had been a ghost in his life. He felt an irrational fear, as if she would somehow look at him and see his mother's face, his father's weakness. He considered withdrawing, but that would be an act of cowardice. He had to see it through. The ceremony was held in a grand historic hall at the university. Julian sat in the front row with the other laureates, his hands clammy. Then she walked onto the stage. Agnes Dubois looked much the same as she had in the infamous video, poised elegant, her silver hair catching the light. She was 97 now, her movements slower, but her eyes were just as sharp, just as intelligent. She spoke not of the past, but of the future. She spoke of the responsibility of engineers not just to create, but to connect. The equations you solve, she said, her voice soft, but carrying through the hall, are not just about thrust and lift. They are about bringing families together, about bridging cultures, about making this vast world feel a little smaller, a little more human. Never forget the human heart that flies inside the steel machine you build. When she called his name, Julian Croft, his own heart hammered against his ribs. He walked onto the stage, took the heavy award from her hands, and shook her offered hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. For a brief moment her eyes held his, and in them he saw no judgment, only a calm, knowing warmth. After the ceremony, as people mingled, Julian knew he couldn't leave. He had to speak to her. He found her standing by a window, looking out at the evening sky. "Dr. Dubois," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She turned. "Mr. Croft, a remarkable paper. Truly. Your work on biofuel synthesis is revolutionary." The praise felt like a hot coal in his chest. "Thank you," he stammered, Dr. Dubois, there's something I have to tell you. My name. It's not the whole story. My given name is Julian Finch. He watched her face for any flicker of recognition, of anger, of disgust. There was none. She simply nodded slowly, her expression unchanged. My mother, he forced the words out, was Caroline Finch. He finally said it. The secret he had carried for 5 years was outspoken to the one person he feared most. He braced himself for the fallout. Agnes was silent for a long moment. Then she gave him a small, sad smile. I know, she said gently. The scholarship committee is very thorough. I review the finalist files myself. Julian was stunned. You knew, and you still chose me. Mr. Croft, she said, turning to fully face him. 5 years ago, I encountered a woman who believed a person's worth was defined by their status and their name. I would be a hypocrite to judge you by that same broken metric. Your name tells me where you came from. Your work, your passion, your character. That is what tells me where you are going. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. Your mother's choices cast a long shadow, but you are not obligated to live in it. Go. Build better wings. That is the only legacy that matters. A wave of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees, washed over Julian. In that quiet hall, the ghost of the past was finally laid to rest, not by anger or revenge, but by an act of deliberate, powerful grace. Agnes Dubois had not just founded an airline. She had, in that moment, founded his future. And he walked out into the night, no longer a Finch or a Croft, but simply himself, finally free to fly. That's the incredible story of Agnes Dubois, and the day a simple flight became a life-altering lesson in humility. It's a powerful reminder that the person you might dismiss could be the very architect of the world you're standing in. True power, true status, isn't about the loud demands you make. It's about the quiet dignity you carry and the legacy you've built. Caroline Finch's life unraveled not just because she was racist, but because her arrogance blinded her to the humanity and history of the person standing right in front of her. What did you think of the karma she received? Was it too harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true stories of justice and unexpected twists. Thanks for listening.